Today we're looking at the Cradle of Humankind, and this again is going to be a little bit different of a presentation than I normally do, although I think it ties in with the whole concept of our spiritual nature. And actually what I'm trying to do with this is to put things in perspective. There's a part of the fossil record that we cannot ignore, and so I think there's a good way to look at it, that where we can combine our spiritual quest with the things that our scientists are telling us. So if you look at this landscape, it looks like it's pretty barren. It looks very much like the area that they discovered some of the earliest human remains and beyond. But do you have any idea where this is? Anybody? Rabbit Valley? It looks almost exactly like the area that they found some of the stuff in. I'll show you. But what you find here, if you've been on the trail through time, how many of you have done that? Beth and I decided to go back out Friday and revisit that. We were there many years ago. But you'll find 140, is that, yeah, 140, I can't see with these new bifocals, but 140 million year old vertebra, and some other, there's a pelvis and there's some other indications that there were some 60 to 90 foot lizards running around. Well, I wouldn't go out there if they were still there. But we were fortunate enough to get one of their ancestors, a collared lizard, who was out there and just kind of basking on one of the rocks, and they're just absolutely beautiful animals. And it would be interesting to me if scientists could actually know what dinosaurs looked like in terms of the skin colors and all the things. I bet it would just be a very rich expression. But I'm sharing this because when you look at the area where they're actually discovered, if I told you this was some place north of Grand Junction or, you know, west, the Book Cliffs or whatever, but this is Ethiopia. And I've always been intrigued by the fact that it looks so much like, that area looks so much like in the Middle East. This is Africa, of course, but this area looks so much like the area we live in. And to me, it helps tie things together. You know, when you read something that seems like it's so far away, well, here they're doing the same thing that we would do here. There's no indication that there were beings walking around 3.5 million years ago in Grand Junction. There were dinosaurs, obviously, but it's considered, East Africa is considered the cradle of humankind. That is where it all began. There was a big debate many years ago that everything started in Europe, and then it moved, I think, over to Asia, and finally settled, as Darwin had predicted, I guess, in Africa. And today there's little doubt that that's where the earliest hominids came from. But it's a very interesting place, and you would never know unless you had an eye to see it. In fact, when we were walking the trail out there and looking, you know, you get signs in front of you, but sometimes you have to look very hard, even when all the rock around it's chipped away and it's right there. Once you see it, you know, it's pretty clear. But it takes a special eye to do that. So you would look at a barren region like this, go out and, you know, toward the Book Cliffs, look at all that. And it's hard to imagine that there were people walking through here and, you know, different things happening at some point. And speaking of walking, Mary Leakey discovered this set of footprints, and I think, can you tell the difference? The bottom ones are the bigger ones, and the top ones are very small ones. What it appears to be is two beings were walking along, and they say it's volcanic ash that probably had a good rain on it. And they walked through this. They dated these footprints to 3.5 million years ago. And they believe they are Australopithecines, which I'm going to talk about a little bit here in a minute. But it's the first evidence, the first conclusive evidence, or very strong evidence, they say, that creatures walked on two legs, back that long ago, that far back. And that is part of what distinguishes that line of beings in the fossil record from other animals, and shows some connection to the human line. So we have two paleontologists that are famous. One is Richard Leaky. He's the son of Louis and Mary Leakey, and his parents were just brilliant archaeologists, paleontologists. But Richard has quite a shining career of his own. And then Donald Johansen, he discovered Lucy. And have all of you heard of Lucy? She's an Australopithecine, about 3.5 feet tall, and represents a line of beings. Johansen says pre-human. He thinks that's the missing link. He traces all of us back to her. But he, there's no definite, you can absolutely say, because Leakey does not agree with that necessarily. Richard Leakey and Donald Johansen are self-described atheists. And I'm going to explain why I think that's true. Their rejection of religion appears to be based on the work of Archbishop James Ussher, who lived 1581, 1656, who believed the earth was created in 4004 BC. And the way he came up with that date is he went through the Bible, he went through the Old Testament, he took all the names, the birthdays, all of the lineage of the folks that he found there, and he came up with this. So that puts the earth at about 6,000 years, the age of the earth at about 6,000 years. So people like Leakey and Johansen look at this information, and there's a lot of people that support this idea. They look at this information and they say that can't possibly be true, because we are dating bones that go way past, that particular age, that particular time. And so they reject the whole thing. And it's almost as if their view of the Bible and spirituality is so narrow, which is surprising because they're scientists. But it's so narrow that they can say, well, that's religion, we're going to reject it. That's God, that's Jesus, that's all the whole thing. So we're going to reject that. And I can totally understand why they do. And if I had not been exposed to a teaching like unity, and I was given this information and also studied my history on dinosaurs and early human beings and all the stuff that fascinates me, that I would have a real hard time putting that in perspective. But I've gotten to a place where I don't have to do that. It's okay to let the ancient Hebrew be the Hebrew that he was. The modern paleoanthropologist's understanding of the human being is quite different from that of the ancient Hebrew, who depicts the first humans, Adam and Eve, and their descendants as a fully developed modern species. And just to give you an idea here, we have Adam and Eve. They look like a couple of Europeans that Eve even shaves her armpits, I guess. And we have Lucy. We have a representation of the kinds of beings these anthropologists deal with. So to say that God created human beings to look like this very handsome pair. So if you're looking at these two pictures, which one would you embrace? If you have any understanding of the fossil record or what's been discovered here, and 6,000 years, the earth, 6,000 years, that's a breath, that's a heartbeat in geological time. There are people that still believe the earth is flat. There's the flat earthers, they're called, and they have that belief, very absolute, very firm, say it can't be proven that it's round, and so, okay, whatever. But the skeleton that you see on the right is the total of Lucy, the discovery that Johansen made back in the 70s. It's about 40% complete. And I believe it's kept in Africa, around the region that it was discovered in Ethiopia. But they did do a world tour with the actual bones at one point, and took them around, showed everybody. It was a huge success, I guess. But I love listening to these guys. I've been listening to both of them all week, different lectures they have given and interviews, and they did debates, and they have a lot of disagreement in from their own perspectives. But tune into them and pick them up on YouTube, because they're worth listening to. But they lack something. Both of them lack something, and they take religion for that at the face value of what's been given from the fundamentalists, from the mainstream Christian theology. And there are a lot of mainstream Christians that are scientists also. So somehow they can bring this together, but their understanding of religion tends to be that typical Bible-based, Bible is the Word of God kind of thing. They see the Bible as a transmission from God to people, where the critical scholar sees or understands the Bible as a transmission from people to people. It's people's understanding that they're trying to persuade others, or trying to help others, or trying to lay down religious law so others will follow it and obey it. So I totally understand why someone who just sees that level of religion, and I don't consider myself a religious person, I consider myself and have my sole interest is in spirituality. And you'll see that distinction made today quite often. But even those who proclaim they reject religion, or don't embrace it, I should say, and embrace spirituality, they can also develop their own religion that binds them just as much. And I think I've discovered that in Unity at some point, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about that. But this idea of evolution, there are people that don't like this idea, that we came from apes, or that we came from something much less than we are now. But let's start with this idea that evolution is a biological rather than a spiritual process. When people talk about soul evolution, I used to embrace that idea, but it makes no sense to me at all now, and for different reasons than I was given. But there was this idea that we are becoming more spiritual all the time. Look at the fossil record and see there's a progression forward, a progression upward. But even Donald Johansen said evolution has no objective. It's not headed any place. We think it is, or many people think it is. It's obvious that we stood on two legs so one day we could walk, text, and carry a drink at the same time. That's obviously why we did that. Because we saw this coming, evolution saw this coming. And I'm naming our little model here Lucy. I don't know what her name is, but she could be a Lucy, easily. So evolution is a response to our environment. It's not a projected plan. It's a response to our environment. It is, and that's a huge difference in how we think of it. And the body is subjected to that. The body responds to climate change. It responds to different things that happen in our environment. If it gets colder, if it was cold long enough, we would probably grow fur again. But what we do instead is put on a coat. But that's still adaptation. We're adapting constantly. But that's a physical thing. It has nothing to do with the spiritual level of the individual. The spiritual level doesn't change, even though the physical does. It's a very important idea to keep if it's going to make sense. At least this is where I'm coming from. This is how I make it make sense. It dawned on me one day that we talk about soul evolution, all of that. That's nonsense. There is no soul evolution. It is a physical thing. Our body is constantly responding to our environment. And it's not just our body, it's all bodies. And just to kind of demonstrate this, what if we dropped our modern Lucy into the environment of our ancient Lucy, she would quickly go extinct. How do we know? Because there's no cell phone reception. She couldn't live 15 minutes without her cell phone, so we know that. So who's more evolved? If you take the environment that Lucy, the early Lucy, grew up in, and you put the modern Lucy into that, would she not have to adapt and evolve big time? And the reverse is true also. If you took the ancient Lucy and gave her a cell phone, she might try to start a fire with it or something, but she wouldn't know that she could call 911 when she saw the saber-toothed tiger, whatever was bugging her. So think of the physical as evolution. Evolution occurs at the physical level. So when a scientist is looking at bones, they're looking at the physical aspect of humankind or animals or whatever. They're not looking at the unseen spiritual reality. So we always keep that in mind. So we talk about the cradle of humankind. Where did the physical human being start? We can trace that back to Africa. In fact, they say if you all of us take a DNA test, we can all trace our ancestry back to Africa. And I think that's very interesting. And it doesn't ruin my faith. It doesn't change anything about how I think. I just find it very interesting. And so I'm not going to take that bit of information and throw it out because I can't figure it out or it doesn't fit in the Bible. I have looked at the Bible in a way that helps me understand what it is, and that frees me from the superstition that surrounds it. If you study it and you understand it, why it was written and how it came about, and the mind that created it that never even conceived of dinosaurs or early people in the sense other than like an Adam and Eve. But you see, even those early writers, they put Adam and Eve there as fully developed people. And our anthropologists, paleoanthropologists would never do that. They can't do it. And so they say, that's garbage. That's not true. Can't be true. Here's what we have in the fossil record. And the question of, do you believe in evolution, came up in one of the interviews with Donald Johansen. He said, no, I don't believe in evolution. He said, I know it as an absolute fact, as I know gravity is an absolute fact. Do I fully understand it? No. But to say I believe in it, do you believe in God? You know, it's the same type of question. I don't believe in God in the sense that, is there one or is there not one? I totally accept that there is a creative life force working through all of us, and if I choose to, I can call it God. But it is a knowing that cannot be denied. So it would be refreshing if you would take a scientist like this who understands so well and can articulate so well their discoveries in the field, which is totally fascinating, how that all happens. And they named Lucy, you probably know they named her because as they were finding fragments of bones here and there, the Beatles song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was being played. They played it on their boombox the whole time, so that's where the name comes from. And Johansen was talking about all the places. There are restaurants in Ethiopia named Lucy, and you can order a Lucy loaf of bread. There's all kinds of things that are named after Lucy. It had made such a huge impact on the global scale. But here's a good example of an animal that has never had to respond to its environment, to changes in its environment. That's the coelacanth. Is that right? Coelacanth? It was believed to be extinct for millions of years. It was discovered to be alive and well. It has not changed in those millions of years because its deep sea environment has not changed. See, that's very interesting to me. Nobody bothered this fish. Nobody was down that deep, could go down that deep and mess around with its environment. We can hurt the environment from up here, you know, and have stuff float down and all, but apparently that has not yet happened. But here is an example of an animal that if its environment doesn't change, neither does it. So that's a physical thing. If something were introduced into that environment where that fish had to adapt or die, it may adapt, it may die. That's happened both ways. Actually, the species of that led to, or actually species of human beings that have existed, there were many that all died out. They met extinction because for some reason they couldn't adapt. That's a big debate on how the Neanderthal went extinct and Homo sapiens did not. And it's some say because Neanderthal was always looking at the ground, was always looking down, and always ate just meat, whereas Homo sapiens looked up. You know, we looked over the hills and we did different things, but I don't know. That's just part of the debate, which is interesting. So the question they ask, the paleoanthropologists ask, is what makes us human? And they answer that question by looking at bones, by looking at the fossil record, by looking at developments in our walking on two legs and our social skills and so forth. Are we the window, the brain, the body, the culture, or are we the light that shines through the window? The anthropologist looks at the window, and there are many windows, there are many kinds of windows to look at. But what about that light shining through? What about that deeper reality? They don't see that, they don't talk about it because it's not fossilized. Never can be. It's a living energy. And so when they ask that question, they're thinking only of physical, material evolution. And they're trying to answer that question, and they do a pretty good job of it, because that side is interesting to me. But they're not asking anything about that light shining through the window. They don't know how to ask that question because it's not something you can weigh or you can measure. It's not something you can look at. It is a subjective experience. The feature that makes us human, this is me speaking, is the faculty of imagination. This faculty frees us from the behavioral restrictions imposed on the rest of the natural world. So what makes us human? What sets us apart from everything else? Is it the fact that we're walking on two legs? Is it the fact that we have cell phones? Is it the fact that we, live in this kind of culture where we have great communications, we can plan, we can think about past, we can do all kinds of things that animals apparently can't do? And I've always said that it's the imagination that sets us apart. The imagination is an upwelling. It's a faculty that can handle that beam of light that we call spirit, that we call God. It can grasp that, and it can express from that understanding rather than saying, I'm just this thing here. It can open us to something greater. If God is infinite, if the creative life force has no restrictions whatsoever, and the human being has this faculty of imagination that has no restrictions whatsoever, now we're in the field of being created in the image and after the likeness of God. With this imagination, there's no limit to what we can do and how we can perceive our world and how we can perceive ourselves. That this energy that we are, this creative life force that we are all expressions of, we have a mind that can grasp what that is, that can experience it. It comes through the imagination. And I think Jesus touched on this in a way that, in a line that we might overlook when he talked about foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests to build in, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. It means that the Son of Man, which means humankind, ordinary man, has no place to lay his head on this earth. That is, we're not of this earth. We are spiritual beings. I think that's what he's saying. The foxes have dens, places to go. It's very predictable. The birds of the air build nests. You find a nest out in your backyard, and if you know what you're looking at, you'll know what kind of nest it is without even seeing the bird. How that nest is built is preordained. Where the fox is going to find its home is preordained in the sense of the type of environment they will build to live in or create to live in. They'll dig a den, or they'll find a place under an old car or something that can be considered their den. But that's all preordained. They're all going to be in that line, and they can't get out of it. And they don't want to get out of it. But we're not that way. We can look at our environment and we can say, I don't particularly like the way that looks, so I think I'll change it. And how do we begin changing? We get a picture in our mind. We use the imagination. So how far can that go? We know it can take us to the moon, and it can take us out into space so we can photograph the Earth from an unimaginable distance and see all these things that we could never even imagine. I shouldn't say we couldn't imagine. Well, we couldn't imagine. We didn't know a lot of stuff looks like it does until we used our imagination to build a tool that allowed us to see it. And then what's that do to the imagination? When you see some of these space objects that some of our telescopes have taken, it stirs the imagination. So the imagination doesn't just wrap its arms around something and stop like the fox and the bird. The imagination is stirred. We start thinking more because we are created in the image and after the likeness of God. That means we're indefinable. We have not been defined, and we never will be defined. But the cradle of humankind is the physical body. Though the body has evolved over time, it is the only vehicle that can carry the divine soul with the capacity for unlimited expression. Science looks at brain size, but it's more like brain capacity that carries this wonderful reality that is the spiritual side of us. What makes the human being lives in the body temporarily. That's where it's kept, no place else. And yes, the physical side we can trace back probably to East Africa. But what makes the human can't be traced back to any place on this planet, because we are infinite. It's that which made the planet. It's that which made all that we see. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. That's you and me. We are the Word. And right now we inhabit a body. And in order to interface and communicate and so on this planet, we have to be cradled in this body. But it's not us. It's the vehicle that we're driving around in. So the cradle of humankind is the physical body, though the body has evolved over time. We don't want to deny that. It is the only vehicle that can carry the divine soul with the capacity for unlimited expression. So if you think about what is the human being, what are we? Am I this? Or am I that which is asking the question? Am I something more? And I think I'm something more. So what this view allows me to do is cheer these guys on that are digging up the bones and find that so fascinating. My specialty is spirituality, and my study has been the Bible. And it is, I am interested in the Bible so I can knock out the myth and appreciate it for what it is. So I fully embrace the Bible, but not as the absolute Word of God. It's the word of the Hebrew, the word of the Greek, the word of the Jew, the word of the early Christian. Not the word of the divine, but neither is Donald Johansen or Richard Leaky. So you can throw your arms around all of them. When you understand that you're not your body, you're something much more than that. All right? Does that help you make you feel better when you think of the physical body you're running around in now? I find it very fascinating. All right. Well, thanks for coming out. Thanks for bearing with me, and see you next week.
1, 2, 3, 4. Sending my love to the world. I'm sending my love to the world. I'm sending my love. I'm sending my love. I'm sending my love to the world. I'm feeling this love in my heart. I'm feeling this love in my heart. Feeling this love, feeling this love, I'm feeling this love in my heart. And this love that I'm feeling keeps on healing and healing. I'm feeling this love in my heart. I'm living this love that I am. Living this love that I am. I'm living this love. I'm living this love. I'm living this love that I am. And this love that I'm living keeps on giving and giving. I'm living this love that I am. We're sending God's love to the world. We're sending God's love to the world. We're sending God's love, sending God's love. We're sending God's love to the world. And this love that we're sending is a love that's never ending. We're sending God's love to the world. I'm sending my love to the world. I'm sending my love to the world. I'm sending my love, sending my love. I'm sending my love to the world. I'm sending my love to the world. I'm sending my love to the world.
You've been watching a talk given by Reverend Doug Bottorff here at Independent Unity in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us spread our message. If you would like to support us, you can do so by clicking the button in the right-hand corner of the video screen. We greatly appreciate your support. Thanks again for watching.